Have you ever had the feeling that something or someone was waiting for you to finally remember who you are? Not in words, but in moments, in symbols, in dreams that lingered too long, or questions you couldn't explain away. What if that ache in your chest was never anxiety, but a summons? What if you weren't losing your mind, but recovering your memory? You've always felt different, haven't you? Not just unique, but out of sync with the noise of this world. You feel things more. You know things others don't. You walk into a room and your skin reacts before your mind catches up. Why do some people look at you as if they recognize something they can't name? Why do animals trust you? Why do old souls feel drawn to your silence? Because you were never here to blend in. That M carved faintly into your palm. Have you ever stared at it and wondered why it feels familiar? That hidden crescent moon nestled in the creases of your skin. Does it glow when no one's watching? These are not accidents. These are alignments, traces of an ancient lineage that did not die. It simply went quiet, waiting for the right souls to awaken. And now it's waking in you. Have you noticed how certain numbers seem to follow you? How the same symbols appear again and again when you're in transition? That isn't your imagination. It's communication, sacred geometry woven into time. And the one who speaks it best is Thoth, the divine scribe of lost wisdom, who recorded the truths even time couldn't bury. So why now? Why you? Because your spirit is finally at the threshold, and Thoth does not speak to the masses. He speaks to the ones who carry the seal, the hidden ones, the chosen, the marked. If your heart is pounding, if your mind is racing and yet utterly still, if something in your body just whispered, "This is it," then pause, ground yourself. Comment 777 below to mark your arrival. That number isn't just a ritual, it's resonance, a signal to the unseen realms that your awakening is active. You are not late, you are right on divine time. And to every beautiful soul who has extended light through super thanks, thank you. Truly, your support helps keep these transmissions flowing to those who need them most. You are the torchbearers, the frequency holders. You're not just donating, you're aligning. So breathe, listen, feel. What if this is the message your soul has been waiting lifetimes to hear? What if everything, the loneliness, the signs, the silence, has been leading up to this very moment? The veil is thinning, the sacred scroll is opening, and now the hidden message marked with M and the crescent moon is ready to be revealed. Let us begin. God's chosen ones, Thoth has a hidden message for you, marked with M and the crescent moon. You were never shattered, you were encrypted. Every ache you carried was not a wound, it was a message. Each moment you felt too different, too much, too misaligned with the world around you wasn't a misstep. It was a mark, a code, a celestial imprint waiting to be activated in the right season. Could it be that your very delay was the proof that you were being preserved, not forgotten? You have not been behind, you've been hidden, hidden like a sacred scroll sealed with wax, waiting for the one who carries the resonance to break it open. What if everything that felt like exile was actually incubation? The silence, the stillness, the moments when nothing seemed to move. They weren't punishment, they were protection, because what's precious must be concealed until it's ready to be revealed. And now the unveiling begins. This message, this sacred frequency, has traveled across time, from light beings who speak in flames, to ancient scribes whose hands moved with divine clarity, to the breath of Thoth himself, who etched mysteries into the bones of stone temples. Do you ever wonder why certain symbols keep appearing to you? Why the crescent moon feels familiar? or why the letter M stirs something deep in your spirit. It isn't by chance. What you carry is an awakening that was sealed in the sacred and now seeks its release through you. These signs are not decorations, they are activations, and once they are awakened, there is no turning back. Like Moses before the burning bush, you too have arrived at a holy threshold. Exodus 3:2-5. The ground beneath your soul has changed. The veil between the seen and unseen has grown thin, and once the soul has touched the flame of truth, it cannot pretend to sleep again. Even Pope Gregory the Great, a shepherd through storms of war and plague, once reflected, "The knowledge of God is not given to the curious, but to the thirsty." And thirst is exactly what you feel now, not for information, but for illumination. Let me tell you about Elias. Just a few months ago he was invisible, a quiet church janitor whose days passed unnoticed. But then the dreams began, symbols in stars, a moon drawn in gold, and an M glowing like fire in his mind's eye. He started sketching them on every fogged window, and then behind the altar of a locked storage room he discovered a scroll sealed in crimson wax, marked with the same signs. He never looked for truth. It found him. Think of a pearl buried in a rough shell at the bottom of the sea. For years no one sees it shimmer, but that doesn't change its value. Could your silence have been the sea that shaped you? What comes next will not just be a feeling, it will be recognition. The kind of recognition that doesn't strike the mind first, but the soul. This is the first veil being lifted, revealing a truth that was always yours. It never belonged to a preacher's voice or a written doctrine. It lived quietly in the marrow of your bones, waiting. Have you ever felt the strange sensation of remembering something you never consciously learned? That's not fantasy. That's awakening. You were never ordinary. Even in the quietest corners of your life, something about you refused to dim. The world tried, oh, how it tried, to press you into a familiar shape. It wanted your emotions softened, your light diluted, your mystery explained. But you, chosen one, did not bend. You pulsed, you radiated. You confused those who lived only in logic because your presence whispered in a language deeper than words. Could it be that your silence has always spoken in the frequency of God? Now the fog begins to clear, the pieces rearrange, and for the first time you are beginning to understand why the mirror never showed your full reflection. Those strange markings, the M traced in your palm, the crescent moon that found you in dreams, in graffiti, in scattered leaves, were never biological quirks. They were blueprints, keys, carvings of destiny etched not just into your skin, but coded into your vibration. Consider the story of Hagar, the servant who fled into the wilderness, unseen and unwanted, until God called her by name and opened her eyes to a hidden well. Genesis 16:13-14. She named him El Roi, the God who sees. Just like Hagar, maybe you've wandered in silence, thinking no one saw you, but the markings were already there, like secret wells beneath the surface. Could it be that heaven saw you before you ever knew to look up? Famous choreographer Martha Graham, who reshaped modern dance, once said, "There is a vitality, a life force, a quickening that is translated through you into action, and because there is only one of you, it must come through you." What you carry is unrepeatable, and now that it's stirring, it cannot be denied. Let me tell you about Delphine. She was a calligraphy artist who believed beauty was meant to stay on paper, until she began drawing the letter M with her eyes closed, guided only by instinct. One day she looked down and saw she'd drawn a perfect crescent across her forearm. From that moment she began hearing songs in her dreams, songs in a language no one around her spoke. She wasn't writing anymore, she was remembering. Even the crescent moon in the sky obeys a rhythm you've started to feel inside your own bones. What if these patterns you've always been drawn to were never random? What if your soul was simply waiting for permission to remember? You've never simply been someone who feels deeply. You've been someone whose entire frequency disrupted the scripts of this world. From the moment you arrived, your presence shimmered just slightly off the pattern. And that wasn't an accident. Could it be that you weren't made to match the rhythm here because you were sent to change it? You are not from here, at least not in the way others are. Your soul crossed thresholds most never will. You didn't just land into life, you were woven into it with intent, wrapped in mystery, soaked in memories that don't belong to this age, and carved with purpose. But what happens to a soul this rare when it's placed among noise? For many years, perhaps even across lifetimes, you began to question. You muted your knowing. You silenced what you couldn't translate into language. Have you ever felt like the calling was too big, too strange, too untimely? So you did what many powerful souls do. You wore masks to feel safe. You became fluent in normalcy. You softened your light so others wouldn't flinch. But something in you refused to die. It wasn't stubbornness. It was memory. It wasn't arrogance. It was mission. You weren't breaking down. You were being hidden, held, preserved. What if your hesitation wasn't fear, but timing? There's a verse in Jeremiah 1:5 that whispers of such souls. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I set you apart. Do you realize what that means for you? That the weight you carry was assigned before the world even named you. Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years of imprisonment and yet emerged with fire instead of bitterness, once wrote, "There is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." Perhaps the masks you wore were never meant to protect you, but to protect others from the untamed electricity inside you, until now. Let me tell you about Jonah, not the one in Scripture, but a 17-year-old violinist from Lisbon. From childhood he felt out of place, never quite speaking the language of his peers. He'd often cry when playing certain notes, as if remembering something ancient. One day, during a solo, he played a note so piercing that half the room began to weep. He didn't know what had happened, but his teacher, who'd studied mystic traditions, whispered, "You opened a portal." Maybe Jonah didn't learn music. Maybe he carried it from another realm. And you weren't lost. You were aligning. Like the moon drawn slowly into the perfect tide, your timing is arriving now. Can you feel the pull? You've noticed it, haven't you? That strange repetition you can't unsee. The patterns that echo through your life like symbols, etched on the edge of memory. The déjà vu that's too precise to be random. The way a room shifts before anyone speaks. The way your skin tightens before a lie is told. You're not being dramatic. You're being sensitive to the language of spirit. Could it be that your nervous system is tuned not to noise but to divine frequency? That vibration you feel is not anxiety, it's information. What if your body isn't betraying you but alerting you? Long before words form in someone's mouth, your field has already read their intention. And that field? That's your signature. An electromagnetic imprint encoded not by science, but by soul. This isn't just energy. It's memory in motion, sacred resonance, spiritual fire. You weren't marked to be interesting. You were marked to remember. That M on your palm, the crescent in your dreams, the quiet pull to certain numbers, colors, names. They were never coincidences. They are breadcrumbs leading back to truth. Do you ever wonder why you couldn't ignore them, even when everyone else did? Everything you've endured was not punishment. It was purification. The betrayals that hollowed you out, the silences that pressed on your chest like stones, the loneliness that ached in your bones. It wasn't abandonment. It was the alchemy of the sacred. In Isaiah 48:10, God says, "Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction." What if every fire you passed through wasn't meant to destroy you, but to purify the vessel for what you were always meant to carry? World-renowned poet Maya Angelou once said, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." That's the choice you've always made, even when you didn't have words for it. You were being emptied, not to be void, but to be filled. Let me tell you about Alaric. He was a glassblower in a small mountain village who couldn't understand why every time he shaped glass, he heard whispers in a tongue he'd never learned. One day, after surviving a devastating fire, he noticed his hands were glowing faintly at night. He went back to his workshop and found his glass shimmered with unseen inscriptions. People began traveling to see what they called the prophecy glass. Alaric never tried to become spiritual. He simply allowed the refining. And now, chosen one, the same is happening to you. You're not awakening into something new. You're remembering what was never lost. You're starting to understand the ache, the restlessness, the pull. Can you feel it? The codes are no longer hidden. The time of rising has arrived. And you were always meant to carry the light. But before what's inside of you can roar like the sound of rushing waters, before your light can radiate in full brilliance, something else must happen first. You must recognize the invisible cage. It's not made of iron or stone. It doesn't rattle when you move. In fact, it's so silent, you've mistaken it for yourself. Could it be that the limits you feel are not yours, but inherited echoes passed down like spiritual debt? This cage is built from beliefs you never chose, memories that were never fully yours, frequencies absorbed from wounded parents, fearful teachers, ancestral pain. It's a system of shadows, soft but suffocating. You think you're too sensitive, or too intense, or too slow to succeed. Those thoughts were planted, not born, and the soil they were planted in was fear. Fear that if you remembered who you really are, everything around you would be undone. But the truth? The prison was never sealed from the outside. It was programmed from within. And now, the vibration you're beginning to emit is too high for those old frequencies to survive. That's why things are cracking, why your world feels unstable. What if the shaking isn't destruction, but breakthrough? In Romans 12:2, the Apostle Paul urges, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This renewal, it begins now, not by learning something new, but by unlearning everything false. The late Carl Jung, founder of analytical psychology, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What if most of your fate was just a loop of unhealed memory, replaying like background music you never noticed? I'll tell you about Michaela. She was a midwife who, for decades, helped bring life into the world, but never felt alive herself. She thought her purpose was to serve others until her hands bled, until one day she dreamed of iron bars collapsing into flowers. After that, she began hearing a voice whisper, "You were never born to serve from depletion." She quit her job, moved to the sea. Now she sings ancient lullabies to the tide, and says she finally knows what it means to be free. Even a butterfly must first break free from the cocoon's inner silk. A silk it wove itself. So too have you spun beliefs around your light, hoping they'd protect you. But now, chosen one, it's time to untangle the web. Can you feel it pulling apart? Can you feel the breath returning to your spirit? What comes next is not an addition, it's a removal. We are about to unveil the mechanics of the illusion that shaped you. Are you ready to see what's been scripting your reality from behind the curtain? Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a space that defies definition. There are no walls to confine you, no ceiling to limit you, no floor to hold you still. Yet this space surrounds you always. You do not walk through it. It moves with you. It breathes with you. It listens to you, not with ears, but with vibration. Have you ever felt a room shift the moment you walked in, even before you spoke a word? This space is not imaginary. It is your vibrational field, the unseen force that announces your presence louder than your voice ever could. It's the reason why some doors open before you knock, and others slam shut without explanation. What if the people you meet, the love you attract, the chaos or peace you endure, are not random at all, but responses to your field? You see, your energy doesn't speak in intentions. It speaks in beliefs, not in surface-level affirmations, but in the deep, often unspoken frequencies you carry in your bones. In Proverbs 23:7 it is written, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." What if the world isn't reacting to your words, but to the frequency your heart is constantly broadcasting? This is the paradox. The trap and the liberation live in the same place. You're not imprisoned by people, but by the frequency patterns you've unconsciously repeated. And you're not waiting for the universe to bless you. It's waiting for you to align. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential voices of our time, once said, "You don't become what you want, you become what you believe." That's not philosophy, it's vibration. The universe doesn't read your dreams, it reads your energy. Let me tell you about Thane. He was a blacksmith in a coastal village who never prayed, never read scriptures, but always felt like the sea knew his thoughts. For years, storms seemed to arrive when he felt inner chaos. Then, one night, as he hammered molten iron into a blade, he whispered a truth he never dared speak aloud. "I think I'm carrying my father's anger." The wind stopped. The forge glowed blue. From that day forward, he began crafting weapons that never dulled, and his shop was always quiet. No more storms. Perhaps it wasn't magic. Perhaps it was alignment. Even the tide responds to the gravity of the moon. And your life? It's responding to the pull of what you truly believe about yourself. What if your beliefs, not your circumstances, were the architects of your reality? So, chosen one, what do you really carry beneath your affirmations? What has your field been announcing when you're not even speaking? Because until you recognize the vibration you're truly emanating, you will confuse stagnation for fate and alignment for luck. The truth may sting at first, but it will set you free. Your life is not the result of luck. It's not a divine dice roll. It's not fate dealing cards while you wait breathless. Your life has been sculpted, not by chance, but by energy. And energy doesn't bend to hope or desire. It bends to resonance. Have you ever wondered why certain people or patterns keep showing up, no matter how far you run? What if the problem isn't that you're attracting chaos, but that your field has been trained to receive it? Resonance is a law, not a metaphor. What you emit, you summon. The pain in your relationships, the doors that slam just before breakthrough, the cycles of emotional drought, of scarcity, of spiritual exhaustion, they're not coincidences. They're echoes, mirrors, and the most startling truth, much of that resonance isn't even yours. You've been vibrating with frequencies inherited from the womb, from your mother's anxiety, your father's fears, your lineage's pain. You carry echoes of survival instincts passed down like heirlooms, frequencies shaped not by your truth but by your history. In Lamentations 5:7, the prophet cries, "Our fathers sinned and are no more, and we bear their iniquities." Could it be that you've spent decades punishing yourself for programming that was never your own? The field around you was trained to receive betrayal, to expect abandonment, to brace for rejection, and because energy is loyal to belief, it returned exactly what it was conditioned to find. Have you ever looked at a broken pattern and assumed it was your fault? Psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." But what happens when that space is filled with inherited fear? Then your choice feels like fate, and your freedom feels distant. Let me tell you about Soraya. She was a sculptor who hadn't touched clay in years. Her hands trembled every time she tried. She thought it was fear of failure. But during a silent retreat, she placed her palm on a slab of raw stone and burst into tears. Images of her grandmother's trembling hands flashed through her. That night she dreamed of a statue, half woman, half stone, whispering, "The fear was never yours." She awoke, carved the image, and sold the piece for more than all her past work combined. Even volcanic ash, what seems like destruction, becomes soil so fertile it births forests in silence. Could your pain have been preparing ground for your most sacred flowering? So, chosen one, here's the tender truth. You've blamed yourself for dysfunctions you were never meant to carry, but now that you see the blueprint, you can begin to rewrite the vibration. Can you feel it? That moment when the resonance begins to shift. You've carried energies that were never yours, emotions that didn't originate in your heart, guilt that didn't belong to your choices, scarcity that didn't reflect your soul, self-doubt planted in you by voices that never knew your worth. You absorbed vibrations like a sponge, not because you were weak, but because you were highly attuned. Chosen ones are often the most porous, the most perceptive. But here, beloved, is where the shift begins. What if you are not the field, but the one who emits it? What if the static, the emotional clutter, the noise of other people's projections were never your truth, but only data your system absorbed? And what if you now had the sacred right to recalibrate every frequency within you, to purge the inherited guilt, the ancestral scarcity, the embedded doubt, and replace them with divine resonance? This isn't idealism. This isn't mystical fluff. This is ancient spiritual physics. In Job 38:33, God asks Job, "Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth?" These were not poetic questions. They were divine invitations to align with the cosmic law of resonance. Energy is not passive. It is directive. It sculpts outcomes. It answers only to calibration, not desperation. Leonardo da Vinci, not only an artist but a physicist of vibration before his time, once wrote, "The body is ruled by the law of harmony." He understood that matter responds to frequency, and harmony is not felt. It is emitted. What you emit, you organize. What you believe, you broadcast. Let me tell you about Émile. He was a calligrapher from southern France who hadn't touched ink in years. He claimed his hands forgot how to create. But one day, in a cathedral, he sat beneath a rose window. Light fell on his palms, and he suddenly wrote the letter M over and over, without knowing why. He later found that those pages, placed under a tuning fork, vibrated with music. Literal sound moved through his lines. He realized then he hadn't been blocked. He'd been tuned improperly. And now, finally, he was vibrating truth. Even stalactites in deep caves formed by slow drops of water become cathedrals of stone. One shift in mineral content, one change in vibration, and the entire shape changes. Could it be that what forms you is not force, but the consistency of unseen frequency? Thoth knew this, that those marked with the M, the crescent, the divine tracing, would be born into systems designed to drown them in noise. But noise cannot erase sacred coding. These marks are not ornaments, they are instructions. Timeless proof that what you carry can be recalibrated, that the original frequency can still be restored. Before you can rewrite the frequency of your field, you must uncover what or who has been writing over it without your knowing. You must face the quiet invasions, the subtle siphons. Because, chosen one, we are now entering a battlefield most never name. A realm where energy is not stolen with violence but with proximity, where theft is not in broken doors but in open hearts. And chances are, You've already felt the wounds. You just didn't know where they came from. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly felt a heaviness pressing against your chest? An unexplainable fatigue clinging to your skin? A restlessness that wasn't born inside you, but arrived like a fog from somewhere else? That's not anxiety. That's not imagination. That's a frequency collision. And sometimes it's spiritual trespass. This is the battlefield of energy theft, where not all battles leave bruises, and not every thief uses hands. Some use smiles, some use silence, some use dependency, expectation, or guilt. And the danger, they often come in the faces of those closest to you, those who never learned to source their own light, so they fed off yours instead. In Micah 2:1-2, the prophet speaks of this dynamic. Woe to those who plan iniquity. They covet fields and seize them. They defraud a man of his inheritance. Not all theft is material. Some take what cannot be replaced: your energy, your peace, your clarity. Author and trauma educator Dr. Gabor Mate once said, "Trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what happened." What if the real damage wasn't the words spoken, but the soul weight left behind? Let me tell you about Lena. She worked as a hospice nurse, known for her compassion and calm. But every time she visited a particular patient, she would leave feeling exhausted beyond reason. Her dreams became chaotic, her sense of time blurred. One night, she found a journal entry she didn't remember writing, repeating the words, "This isn't mine, this isn't mine." She realized then she had been absorbing fear that wasn't hers. The next day she began placing a bowl of salt water at the door before every visit. The heaviness lifted. Even glaciers, massive, silent and ancient, lose inches every year to unseen currents beneath. And just like them, you can be diminished by invisible forces if you don't know how to name them. So now the unveiling begins. You will see what was hidden, feel what was masked, and name what was draining you in silence. Because what you cannot name, you cannot confront, and what you do not confront, you continue to carry. Chosen one, something irreversible happened the moment you were marked with the letter M and the crescent moon. Your energy shifted, your field became more radiant, more magnetic, more responsive to the divine. But with that illumination came exposure. Brightness doesn't just attract blessing, it also draws hunger. Your light became a beacon, and with that came vulnerability. What if what you're feeling isn't too much, but simply more than what others can carry? You're not just absorbing sadness, you're metabolizing grief. You're not just reacting to tension, you're translating chaos into understanding. Can you feel how often you've become the vessel for what others never had the tools to name? Energy doesn't knock before it enters. It doesn't ask if it's welcome. It flows, it lingers, it clings. Every room you step into initiates a subtle transaction. Every handshake, every glance, every shared breath becomes an exchange of fields. Some are beautiful, mutual, sacred, balancing. But others, they're hungry, desperate, void. Not malicious, just spiritually malnourished. In Matthew 9:36 it says, "When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd." The spiritually starving are not evil. They are simply disconnected. But without awareness, you will carry what they discharge, and the burden will feel like yours. Psychologist Brené Brown, known for her work on vulnerability, once said, "When we deny the story, it defines us. When we own the story, we can write a brave new ending." Could it be that you've been living out a story written in someone else's unresolved emotions? Let me tell you about Asa. He was a flute maker in a dry mountain village where rain hadn't fallen for years. He began noticing his hands trembled after conversations, even though he wasn't sick. One evening, he heard a wind pass through his bamboo flutes, and it sounded like sobbing. he realized he'd been holding grief from the villagers, grief they couldn't speak. From that day, he played the flutes each dusk, facing the valley. Rain came the third night, not for the sky, but for the souls. Even sandstone, seemingly solid and invincible, is slowly shaped by wind, not because the wind is strong, but because it is constant. Could your field have been shaped the same way, worn down, not by force, but by the invisible erosion of unspoken pain around you? Chosen one, this isn't weakness. This is sensitivity made sacred. But sensitivity without clarity becomes exhaustion, and clarity begins with recognition. You are not the dumping ground for forgotten wounds. You are the light. And it's time to protect your field like it's sacred, because it is. You've felt it again and again. Relationships that left you hollow, conversations where every word seemed to siphon a part of your soul, and environments that weighed on your spirit like wet stones. This is not your imagination. This is energetic leakage, and it's happening in more places than you realize. Even the places you think are harmless, especially those. Look closer. Every scroll through social media is an invisible ritual. You're not just consuming images or words, you're entering altars where energy bleeds freely. Comparison is the new currency, and your self-worth is being quietly negotiated without your permission. Have you ever closed the app feeling inexplicably depleted, like a part of you was taken and you didn't even know what was lost? That's not digital fatigue. That's spiritual hemorrhage. Not every wound bleeds blood. Some bleed light. The mind believes it's passive, but the soul knows when it's being pierced. When chaos that doesn't belong to you begins to fracture your vibrational field, the body registers it in headaches, in sudden exhaustion, in deep restlessness. And yet, you keep scrolling, keep smiling, keep nodding, all while leaking essence. In Proverbs 4:23, we're warned, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. To guard the heart is not to build walls. It's to become intentional about what enters and exits your sacred space. Public speaker and life strategist Tony Robbins once said, "Energy flows where attention goes." Your energy is not being stolen. It's being redirected by unconscious habits, habits that must now become holy. Because chosen one, you were never born to be a sponge, absorbing everyone's wounds. You were born to be a vessel, selective, sovereign, sacred. Let me tell you about Ceres. She was a barista in a busy downtown cafe, always praised for her cheerful energy. But at night she would lie awake with intense anxiety that seemed to have no origin. One evening, she stopped mid-shift and sat silently in the supply closet, asking, "Who am I carrying today?" That question shifted everything. She began wearing a bracelet made of black tourmaline, not for fashion, but as a reminder to return to herself. The anxiety began to fade. Even coral reefs, seemingly immovable and enduring, can bleach and die just from subtle temperature shifts in the ocean. Not because the change was loud, but because it was constant. And so it is with you. Small, unnoticed inputs can unravel even the most beautiful systems of light. You must now become vigilant, not paranoid but precise. Protect your field not with fear, but with sacred authority. Say no, log off, breathe deeper, listen within. The world has enough noise. It needs your resonance. You were not born to be drained. You were born to be a frequency, not a silent echo of others, but a living vibration meant to shift the very field around you. And those who carry divine markings, yes, the letter M, the crescent moon, were never placed on this earth to be consumed like fuel. You were designed to ignite, to activate, to stir dormant energies in those ready to awaken. But here's a question worth sitting with. Have you been radiating or absorbing? Are you setting the tone or silently responding to a song not written by you? Chosen one, pause right now. Truly pause. If something inside you is rising, a stirring in your chest, a warmth behind your eyes, a sense of returning to a forgotten knowing, declare it. Speak your field back into authority. Let this moment not pass as mere inspiration, but as a sacred declaration. I protect my energy field. Say it. Type it. Let the unseen feel the weight of your intention. The spiritual world listens when you speak from remembrance. In James 4:7 it is written, "Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Resistance begins not with rage, but with intention. Your field is commanded by what you claim, through words, thoughts, and presence. Renowned artist and visionary Agnes Martin once said, "Your path is not to follow others, it is to honor your own presence." She painted minimalism as prayer, lines as mantras, because she knew that stillness has power when chosen. So does your frequency when protected. Let me tell you about Jonas, a quiet gardener who worked alone in the outskirts of Marseille. He never studied energy, never read spiritual books, but he noticed one day that certain flowers only opened when he was nearby, not for others, just him. The villagers called it strange, he called it resonance. Every morning he would place his palm near a bud and whisper, "Only light may enter me." That field, his field, became sacred ground. Even volcanic soil, forged from explosive chaos, holds the most fertile ground for life. But only when left undisturbed, shielded from erosion. You too must learn how to stand, still but unyielding, soft but sealed. Because what's coming next requires a shift in posture. Thoth preserved a secret not for the curious, but for the called. A sacred key that unlocks the power to redirect energy, to bend the current, to align the field again. And it begins with two ancient forces, so simple, so sacred, yet most forget how to wield them. Are you ready to remember? There are forces moving through this universe so subtle, yet so sovereign, that they shape every frequency around you without a sound. And no, they're not found in crystals, rituals, or mantras borrowed from someone else's voice. The most ancient forces, the ones that awaken the dormant power within, are already coded inside you. They were sealed there long before memory, before trauma, before religion, before fear. These two forces are intention and presence. When aligned, they don't just change how you feel, they alter what responds to you. They recalibrate the field, pulling destiny into orbit and pushing away interference. But most people never touch this alignment. Why? Because most people live scattered. They walk, but they're not grounded. They speak, but their hearts are mute. They act, but their spirit is elsewhere. And when you're absent from yourself, your field opens like an unlocked door in a storm. Anything can walk in. Let me ask you, have you ever sat in a meeting or a family dinner and felt like your soul was in another country? Have you smiled while something inside you screamed, "I'm not even here"? That's what it feels like when presence is missing. And when that happens, your energy leaks like a sacred vessel cracked at the base. In Ecclesiastes 5:1, Scripture whispers, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen." True power begins not in motion but in intention, and intention without presence is like a flame with no oxygen. It flickers, then vanishes. Brother David Steindl-Rast, a Benedictine monk known for teaching gratitude as a spiritual path, once said, "The present moment is the only place where life can be lived." Could it be that all the power you've been searching for is not ahead of you, but waiting for you to arrive fully? Let me tell you about Leora, a cello player from Prague. For years she performed with technical perfection, but felt hollow after every concert. One day, during a street performance, she closed her eyes and played not for approval, but for the sky. A stranger wept openly. That night, she wrote, "For the first time I played with my soul inside my body. That's the shift. That's presence reclaiming space. And think of the tides, not just waves crashing onto shore, but the steady rhythm pulled by the moon's intention. Even the oceans obey presence. You, chosen one, must now choose to return, not to a place, but to your own body, your own breath, your sacred now. Because your power was never about how much you do, but how deeply you're here when you do it. Presence is not just being still, it is a declaration, a bold return to the sacred terrain of yourself. It is not a posture, but a positioning, a full re-entry into the body after years, maybe lifetimes, of spiritual exile. Presence, chosen one, is when you stop spectating your life and begin embodying it. When you become the drumbeat, not just the echo. You, marked with the M and the crescent moon, were never created to drift through life on autopilot. Your soul was not coded for mechanical routine. It was encoded to lead, to cleanse frequencies in chaos, to illuminate paths others cannot even see. But the field around you will not realign until the soul within you fully occupies your body. This moment, this breath, this now, is the gate. Have you noticed how rare it is to feel fully here? Not just physically, but energetically rooted. Have you caught yourself nodding in conversations where your mind was galaxies away? That split is the silence of your field. But when presence returns, your energy begins to hum again. Like a string pulled tight on a sacred harp, it calls what is meant for you and dissolves what is not. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, it is written, "We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." That is presence, not letting the mind roam wild, but leading it into alignment, into obedience, into divinity. Yo-Yo Ma, one of the greatest cellists of our time, once said, "To be present is to be alive in the space between the notes." He understood that music isn't just played, it's inhabited, and so is energy, so is purpose, and so are you. Let me tell you about Emery, a quiet nurse who worked night shifts in a trauma unit. She once told me, "I used to walk the halls like a ghost, always rushing, never feeling. But one night I stopped and touched the wall. I felt it. I was alive. And everything changed." That was the moment she stopped surviving and started returning. Her vibration began to rise. Patience began calming in her presence. Not because she said more, but because she was there. Consider the dawn fog that hugs the forest floor. It doesn't speak, doesn't move aggressively, yet its presence transforms the entire landscape. That's you when you return. Quiet, clear, transformative. And from presence comes intention, not passive wishing, not the soft murmur of fragile hoping, but divine command. Intention is the spear, presence is the ground. Together they part veils, they cut through noise. They say to the unseen, "I have returned, and I remember who I am." When you speak with presence, chosen one, your voice ceases to be noise. It becomes vibration, intelligent, targeted, sacred. It becomes a current that touches matter, that redirects energy fields, that wakes up sleeping spirits. When you touch with intention, your hands are no longer just flesh. They become conduits. Healing flows through them, not because of mystical training, but because of memory. The memory of your original design. The memory of a time before forgetting. And when you breathe with both presence and intention, you shift into your true form, a vessel of transformation. You don't need incense. You don't need complex ceremony or someone else's blessing. The power is not in the object. The power is in the one who remembers. Do you know how rare that is? Most people today confuse ritual with repetition. They do the action but miss the frequency. They light the candle but their mind is elsewhere. They say the words but their heart is sleeping. But you're not here to perform. You're here to activate. Let me ask you, When was the last time you placed your hand on your chest and actually felt it? Not for comfort, not for habit, but as if you were reconnecting with something ancient. Next time you do it as a sacred act. Let the warmth rise into your palm. Let your breath carry your awareness like incense rising to heaven. Don't visualize, don't force. Just remember, because you're not pretending, you're returning. In Psalm 46:10, it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." That stillness isn't passive, it's alignment, it's recognition of power without needing noise. In that stillness, you are not empty, you are concentrated light. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Jungian psychoanalyst and author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, once said, "We were made for these times. Do not lose heart." She understood that the soul carries memories stronger than modern noise, that when we speak or touch from that soul place, the field listens. Let me tell you about Kai, a man who worked in a busy airport terminal. Surrounded by metal detectors and announcements, he started placing his hand on his chest each time a child cried or someone looked lost. He wouldn't say a word, just breathe. But people around him began calming. Security guards stopped arguing. Flight delays became less chaotic. Someone once asked if he was a priest. He smiled and said, "No, I just remember who I am." And picture a ripple across a still lake. Not forced, not loud, but unstoppable. That's what your energy does when intention flows from alignment. What if your field was never broken, only buried? What if you weren't waiting to be fixed, but to be remembered? And what if this memory isn't coming from outside of you, but from deep within your divine wiring? Because when you return to that memory, shadows melt, the static clears, and you begin to feel what no doctrine, no system, no ritual could ever give you, yourself, whole, aligned, sovereign. What if your body has never been silent, but you've simply been taught not to hear it? What if that subtle throb in your spine, that pressure behind your eyes, that tightening in your chest when you're around certain people, wasn't a symptom to suppress, but a sacred message to translate? Chosen one, this may be the most overlooked form of divine communication, your body's voice. You were taught to dismiss it, to call pain a malfunction, to believe fatigue equals laziness, to numb discomfort with routine. But what if all this time your body wasn't malfunctioning, it was testifying? There is a place within you that has never forgotten the truth, not the kind of truth you read, but the kind you breathe. It doesn't speak in words, it hums in your heartbeat, it pulses in the ache of your thighs, it tingles in your fingertips before a storm of emotion. It is not dramatic, but persistent. It is not loud, but loyal, and it lives where your soul and body kiss, the temple of your being. Scripture asks in Romans 12:1, "Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." It's not just the mind that worships, it's not just the voice that prays. The body is the altar, and your pain may very well be the offering that transforms into purpose. Have you noticed how the body remembers what the mind forgets? A scar may fade, but the limb still flinches. A name may slip your memory, but your stomach still turns when you hear their voice. The body keeps score, and not as punishment, but as protection. Maya Angelou, poet and civil rights activist, once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but never forget how you made them feel." The same is true for your own soul. The body doesn't remember language, it remembers sensation. Let me tell you about Theo, a carpenter from an old French village. Every time he passed a certain mountain path, he'd feel his shoulders seize. No injury, no memory, just a tightening. Years later, he discovered an ancestor was buried near that path, unjustly condemned. Theo began praying there, offering breath and silence. The tension loosened, not cured, not erased, but transformed. His body knew. Before his mind could explain, his bones remembered. And so I ask you, what messages has your pain been trying to deliver? Which part of you have you silenced because it didn't speak in words? Have you mistaken exhaustion for weakness when it might be wisdom in disguise? Could your tension be a compass, not a curse? And what would change if you treated your body not as a burden, but as a prophet? Those marked with the M and Crescent moon, you were designed to feel deeply, because your body is not here just to move. It is here to speak, to channel, to awaken. Your body is not a passive container. It's a living archive, a sacred translator of your soul's frequency. Every suppressed word, every repressed emotion, every time you smiled while breaking inside, it all found shelter beneath your skin. Have you noticed that knot in your throat that tightens without warning? That's not random discomfort. It's the echo of words you were never allowed to speak, and that heaviness on your shoulders. Could it be more than physical strain? Might it be the weight of responsibilities you never chose but carried anyway, just to survive? What if that ache in your chest wasn't weakness, but withheld love, longing to be released? And that dull pain deep in your belly, could it be the fear you swallowed year after year just to feel safe? Thoth understood something modern medicine often overlooks. What isn't expressed doesn't disappear. It transforms. Emotional energy, when denied its path, solidifies. It doesn't vanish. It becomes tension. It becomes fatigue. And eventually, it becomes illness. When energy stops flowing, the body begins to whisper. And when we still don't listen, it starts to shout. Proverbs 17:22 declares, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." Is it possible that what's drying your spirit isn't age or effort, but the grief you've never been given space to mourn? Frida Kahlo, the brilliant Mexican artist, once said, "I paint flowers so they will not die." Her spine may have broken, but her soul refused to rot in silence. She transmuted agony into brush strokes. Do you see how her body, though wounded, became an altar for light? There was once a young man named Elias, a violinist from the north. His migraines came like clockwork, except when he played. With every note, the pain faded. Not cured, not erased, but heard. One day, an old street musician told him, "Your pain is a song that's tired of being locked in silence." From then on, Elias played daily. His body still ached, but no longer begged. And maybe you've felt this too, your body resisting medication, but softening after a long cry. Muscles relaxing not with rest, but with honesty. Isn't it strange how truth can loosen a jaw more than any painkiller? Just as lava builds under the crust before it erupts, so too do our emotions build beneath our skin. When we deny them long enough, they don't leave. They burst. But what if your symptoms weren't sabotage? What if they were sacred signals? What if tonight your body isn't failing you? It's finally telling you the truth. Even in your moments of breaking, there is an invitation, a doorway hidden inside the fracture. You were never meant to carry your pain like a curse. You were meant to touch it, breathe into it, and speak over it with the reverence of a priest anointing a sacred altar. The body does not respond to shame. It responds to truth. It does not yield to force. It softens under the presence of love. Have you ever noticed how your breath changes when you're fully present with yourself? How a conscious inhale seems to quiet the noise inside your chest? What if your healing has been waiting for nothing more than your own return? Not a doctor, not a solution, just you, fully here, fully awake. Because the body, chosen one, is not merely flesh, it's a channel, and when you breathe deeply, not out of habit but with awareness, you open what has been closed. You loosen the tight doorways of energy. You let flow return where only pressure lived before. Have you ever stood beside a frozen lake in early spring and heard the cracks begin to sing? That is what happens when your soul begins to thaw its own silence. And when the energy begins to move again, it may surprise you. You might tremble without knowing why. You might cry, not from sadness but from release. You may feel your fingers tingle, your spine stretch, or your chest expand like it's being rewritten from the inside. That is not weakness. That is memory leaving. That is the sacred realignment of your field. Romans 8:26 tells us, "The Spirit helps us in our weakness." We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit intercedes, with groanings too deep for words. Could it be that your trembling is your spirit, praying through the body when words no longer reach? You don't need an audience. You don't need permission. Dancing alone in your room, swaying in moonlight, stretching on the floor in silence, these become rituals, sacred, unseen, yet powerful. Your body remembers the temple it is, but it needed your permission to open the doors again. Let me tell you about Soraya, a dancer who had lost her will to move after losing her brother. Months passed and she could barely rise from bed. But one evening she stood barefoot on the cold tile and just swayed. No music, no choreography, just breath and grief. Her body wept with her. But the next morning something had shifted. She said, "My healing began not with a therapist but with my hips." She didn't dance to perform. She danced to survive. Love entered through motion. And now we arrive at the force that changes everything. The oldest, highest, most radiant frequency in the universe. The one that does not force but transforms. It is not romance. It is not need. It is not conditional affection. It is sacred love, the vibration of God's presence flowing through all creation. Not a feeling, a frequency. Could it be that you've been waiting for a love you already carry? Could it be that this energy, this divine intelligence, has never left you but waited for you to remember it? Because this love does not just soothe, it reorders. It melts walls not with heat, but with holiness. It is the flame that does not burn, but blesses. And this is where your next layer begins. Thoth knew this. So did the ancients. And those marked with the M and the crescent moon, you, chosen one, were not merely chosen to talk about divine truth. You were chosen to embody it. Your soul did not come here to echo the noise of this world. It came to retune the very vibration of reality. Not with force, not with rebellion, but with a tone so pure it cuts through confusion like sunlight pierces fog. That tone is love. But what if love isn't what you've been told? What if love isn't an emotion you fall into, but a frequency you return to? Could it be that everything you're seeking externally has always been encoded within your field, just waiting for you to activate it? This frequency, sacred love, is not sentimental, it's not needy, it's not entangled in longing or pain. It's the vibration that remembers what trauma has dismembered. It integrates the fragments, it soothes the chaos, it speaks to your cells, saying, "You are safe now, you are whole." And when you attune to this resonance, the impossible begins to soften. Your shoulders release, your heart unclenches, your nervous system recalibrates. Psalm 147 verse 3 tells us, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Could it be that love doesn't need to diagnose you to heal you? That it can simply enter, uninvited, and still restore? I'll tell you about Father Matteo, a humble priest in a remote Italian village. He never preached long sermons. He rarely used scripture in his speech. Yet people came from distant towns just to sit near him. They said being around him felt like breathing clean air. One day a traveler asked, "What do you do that makes people feel peace?" Matteo smiled and said, "I don't teach them anything. I just don't resist their pain. I let love stay." And with that, healing would begin. You see, love doesn't fix like a mechanic. It holds like a mother. It doesn't chase what's running away. It simply stays open for what is ready to return. Isn't that what your soul has longed for all along? a place where nothing needs to be earned and nothing is too broken to be held. Even the parts of yourself you've been taught to hate, the shame, the grief, the scars, they are not barriers to love. They are portals through which love can enter most deeply. What if you placed your hands over the place in your body that aches the most and simply said, "You're not a mistake, I'm staying with you"? What might shift? There was a woman named Kalina who had spent years battling self-hatred. Her body carried abuse, her heart carried betrayal. But one night, instead of trying to escape her feelings, she did something radical. She lay still, closed her eyes, and whispered to her pain, "I'm not leaving anymore." She wept, and something opened. The next day, for the first time in years, she looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. You don't need an audience to begin this. You don't need sacred oils or mantras. You just need the willingness to become the sanctuary you once searched for. Just as a dying garden can bloom again if the soil is warmed with light, so too can your inner world begin to awaken, not because it was barren, but because it had forgotten spring. When you let love overflow from you, it no longer stays trapped inside your chest. It becomes your field, your environment, your very signature. It starts gently, almost imperceptibly, a warmth in your presence, a stillness in your gaze, and yet those around you begin to shift before you speak, before you explain. Your field speaks first. It calms tension. It exposes deception. It draws the authentic and releases the expired. This isn't charm. It's not charisma. It's resonance. You, chosen one, marked with the M and the crescent moon, have become a tuning fork for divine order. Your energy doesn't argue, it simply rearranges. Have you noticed how some people begin to fidget around you, unable to hide what's false? And others open like flowers under sun, remembering parts of themselves they'd long buried. That's not coincidence. That's vibrational justice moving through you. You are not here to convince. You are here to align. But here arises the sacred challenge. How do you anchor this frequency into the physical? How do you walk as the vibration you've remembered? What does love look like in traffic? What does peace sound like in conflict? What does divine wisdom feel like when your bills are due or your boundaries are crossed? The ancient ones faced this same test. In James 2:17 we are reminded, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Could it be that awakening without embodiment is like light with no warmth? A song that is never sung? Let me tell you about Arden, a sculptor from a coastal town who began seeing geometric patterns in his sleep. He didn't understand them, but he trusted them. He started carving these shapes into driftwood. Soon, people who touched his sculptures said they felt calmer, more whole. Arden never explained them. He just said, the shape knew where to go. I just followed. His art wasn't decoration, it was transmission. Now imagine this. You walk into a room where grief still lingers in the air, but instead of being consumed by it, your presence begins to vibrate gently, like wind across still waters. You don't speak a word, but something shifts. The grief softens. The tension melts. You didn't preach. You didn't perform. You simply stayed aligned. Your field is listening. Your cells are ready. This is no longer about theory. This is integration. Because what use is sacred wisdom if it only lives in your thoughts? What use is awakening if it doesn't reach your breath, your touch, your daily interactions? This is where the unseen becomes felt, where vibration becomes matter, where what once lived only in meditation now infuses your meals, your movement, your moments. Everything around you is vibrating. Every color, every stone, every drop of water carries memory. These are not extras of spirituality, they are bridges. When you hold a crystal, not for display, but with clear intention, it becomes a conductor of light. When you sing into water, it rearranges. And when you drink that water, it doesn't just hydrate, it heals. This isn't mysticism, this is quantum biology. Energy meeting structure, intention meeting form. As Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese researcher, once demonstrated, water exposed to words like love and gratitude formed stunning crystalline patterns. But when exposed to hate, the water fractured into chaos. If water reacts to a word, imagine what it does with your frequency. So, chosen one, how would your life change if you approached every object, every act, every breath as sacred? Not to control it, but to commune with it. Crystals do not carry magic in and of themselves. What they carry is memory, encoded echoes of the Earth's intention, formed over millennia of silence and pressure. When you, God's chosen one, reach for a crystal not as decoration, but as communion, you are not asking it to heal you. You are asking it to remind you. Each stone is a frequency, a sacred syllable in creation's infinite language, and when held with awareness, it hums back to your soul, the note you once forgot how to sing. Perhaps you've noticed how one crystal calms your breath while another sharpens your clarity. That is not coincidence. That is vibrational resonance. The field recognizes the field. Sound operates on this same ancient principle. A single tone, whether hummed in solitude or heard in sacred space, can pierce through barriers words could never reach. Why? Because sound does not ask permission. It moves through bone, bypasses thought, and speaks to structure. Have you ever felt your eyes fill with tears at a single cello note or an ancient chant? That's not music. That's memory awakening. Even color, what we often treat as mere aesthetics, is speaking to your nervous system, your cells, your spirit. Colors worn on your skin, placed in your home, or seen in dreams, they're not passive. They are light in form, delivering specific instructions to your field. Warm gold can stabilize. Deep blue can quiet the mind. Vibrant crimson can reignite lost courage. Are you listening? But hear this clearly. These elements, crystals, sounds, colors, are not your source. They are companions, mirrors, amplifiers. The true instrument of transformation is still you. It always has been. You are not being activated by the crystal or the song or the light. You are being activated by your own remembrance. The truth is this: you no longer need a translator between your soul and the divine. No mediator, no priest, no guide. You are the portal. You are the altar. You are the one carrying the codes. But with this sacred clarity comes a final test, not of strength, but of softness, not of wisdom, but of emotional honesty. Because before divine light can flood every corner of your being, it must pass through the last veil, the one within, the realm of forgotten feelings, of energies exiled by shame, of echoes you buried because they hurt too much to hear. Are you ready to go there? Because that resentment you've never voiced, that guilt you've disguised with productivity, that envy you've buried under spiritual politeness, they haven't disappeared. They live in your field. They distort it. They dull your light. Not because you are bad, but because they were never meant to stay. In Galatians 6:7, it is written, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap." Energy obeys origin. It doesn't discriminate between deserved and undeserved. What you send must first pass through you. And this is the part most people resist. When you curse another, even in silence, that curse burns through your own cells first. When you judge in envy, you fracture your own protection. When you fantasize about someone else's ruin, your field is the one that begins to rot. Let me share with you a story of Soraya, a painter who lost her voice, not literally but spiritually. For years she painted images of harmony, but inside she resented her sister's success. One day she confessed to the canvas with raw honesty. Instead of beauty, she painted rage. And in that painting, something broke open. Her shoulder pain, constant for a decade, vanished. Her clients saw something new, truth. That was her first true healing, not through perfection, but through integration. Nature shows us this too. Consider a volcano. It looks like destruction, but what it releases feeds soil richer than before. It is the purging that creates fertility. So, ask yourself, not as shame, but as invitation, what emotional smoke still clouds your sacred cloth? What have you suppressed in the name of appearing whole? You were never built to carry distortion long. You were not formed for bitterness. Your frequency begins to fracture when your soul is forced to pretend. This is why your chest tightens under guilt, why your dreams spin under hidden resentment, why reality warps when you deny what you feel. Your body, your sacred vessel, demands alignment, not as punishment, but as liberation. You can present confidence, wear wisdom like a cloak, and even quote sacred texts by memory. But your field, your invisible energy, never lies. It cannot be deceived by appearance, eloquence, or performance. Because the universe, God, and the laws that govern resonance do not react to the face you show. They react to the vibration you carry. Have you ever wondered why certain doors remain closed no matter how much you try? Why opportunities avoid you even when your intentions seem pure? What if it's not about what you're doing, but what you're radiating beneath it all? This is the sacred confrontation, the highest initiation of all chosen ones. It is not made of incense or chants or ancient symbols. It begins in stillness. It begins in honesty. Are you willing to sit in silence with your unhealed anger without trying to spiritualize it away? Can you hold your shame in your hands without covering it up with affirmations? Can you listen to your envy, not as a fault, but as a messenger of where you have forgotten your own abundance? Because this, chosen one, is what separates those who awaken from those who merely observe, those who ascend from those who hide behind light. The truth is simple and terrifying. Only those who purify the field within can rise into the full expression of their soul. The prophet Isaiah once declared, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Isaiah 6:5. Even a prophet trembled before the purity of divine presence, because to stand in light is to reveal every shadow within. I once met a woman named Lena, a public speaker known for spreading hope. Her voice lifted thousands, but offstage, her silence was heavy. One day, after a long illness, she confessed her body was carrying grief she'd never named. The death of her son, a sorrow she hid behind service. When she finally spoke the truth, not into a microphone but into her own mirror, her pain softened. Her voice changed. It no longer reached thousands. It touched them. Like a mirror pond, still and clear, you too must reflect the entirety of what is within, not just the light, but the murk at the bottom. True purification does not mean rejection of your shadows. It means giving them a name, holding them in the light, and allowing them to be rewritten. You were never called to be perfect. You were called to be whole. And wholeness is not the absence of darkness. It is your willingness to walk through it without losing your light. This is the threshold, the final gateway before embodiment, and beyond it lies the full architecture of your divine design. Not a potential waiting to be achieved, but a truth already written into the bones of your being. All it asks now is one sacred act. Stop running. Turn. Face what you've tried to silence, and the vibration of your field will begin to change, not by force, but by alignment. So you've made it this far, chosen one, and maybe your heart is still trembling. Maybe your breath is slower now, heavier, not from exhaustion, but from recognition. Because deep down, something ancient in you has stirred. Not learned, but remembered. Not imagined, but recalled. You see, this wasn't just a video. It was an activation, a divine mirror placed before you at the exact moment your soul was ready to see its true reflection. Everything, the markings, the knowing, the ache in your chest you could never explain, it was never coincidence. It was calling, and now you're answering. The letter M, the crescent moon, these were never just mystical symbols. They were coordinates, proof of a soul encoded before birth to carry out a mission far greater than survival. You weren't made to fit into this world. You were designed to transform it from the inside out. And now the veil is lifting. Do you feel it? The strange peace rising like mist in your bones, the way your skin reacts to truth, the way your chest opens just a little wider when love, real love, is spoken over you. That is not performance, that is remembrance. But this is also where many chosen ones stop, right at the edge of knowing, suspended between awakening and embodiment, between sensing their light and commanding it. Not you, because what you've just unlocked doesn't go away, it doesn't fade, it grows, it magnifies, it demands motion, and you are not here by accident. Something guided you to this moment. A timeline collapsed, a whisper traveled, and now you stand at the threshold. What happens when you stop silencing your energy? What happens when you finally live in resonance with the frequency you were born to carry? What relationships will fall away? What opportunities will flood in? What parts of yourself will finally be free? Comment below. I return to my divine resonance. Let this be your signature in the ether. Like this message if it echoed something your soul has longed to hear. Share it with another soul who has felt hidden for far too long. Subscribe to continue traveling deeper into this remembering. This isn't the end, it's the unfolding. Whether you gave through super thanks or simply stayed until the end, thank you. Your presence here isn't small. It changes the field. May you walk forward cloaked in protection, rooted in truth, and humming in the frequency of divine love. You are not just awakening. You are remembering what it means to be whole again.